If there is any scout or anyone in general that really wants to defend Ewers and be his biggest fan, this is going to be their number one argument, and they do have a very fair case and clear evidence here. Hey y'all! For this week's video, we'll be doing an in-depth analysis of Texas quarterback Quinn Ewers. Sorry for changing plans again after I said I would cover Jalen Milroe last week, but I wanted to get Ewers done quickly since, honestly, I was very curious how he would end up grading out. I plan to actually cover Jalen Milroe next week, so it won't be much longer before I go over his grading and eval. But anyways, back to Ewers. As my usual note about these, my evals use a lot of different grading methods, which if you want more details on these, you can check out my eval on Cam Ward, which should be accessible with the link that should be on the screen now, as I have more details in that video. Also, if you want to check out my grades and evals of the quarterbacks from last year for reference, you can check them out with the link in the description. For any new viewers, I'll be trying to cover a quarterback nearly every week leading up to the 2025 NFL Draft, so if you don't want to miss out on any future quarterbacks evals, be sure to subscribe. Now let's take a look at Ewers. Starting with a quick look at his basic stats, if you look at Ewers' full season numbers, they actually look pretty solid. He completed 65.8% of his passes for a total of 3,472 yards and 31 touchdowns. He did have 12 interceptions and didn't add much on the ground while also still having 7 fumbles, but in terms of production, those season totals seem really solid for anyone just doing a quick pulse check of how Ewers did and if they didn't get a chance to watch him. Unfortunately, we see a lot of his limitations when we look at his performances against tough competition. He had a lot of games against ranked teams, but I tried to prioritize the ones against the best defenses that I felt were the toughest. So that wound up having me chart his games against Ohio State, both of his Georgia games, and Michigan. Outside of his Michigan game, which we'll do a deeper dive into later as I think it's more clear from his box score that was his best game of the season, he had a lot of struggles against Ohio State and in the Georgia games. Ewers completed less than 60% of his passes in those 3 games, had several sacks with 5 per game between the 3, and multiple interceptions and fumbles with a total of 7 combined interceptions and fumbles in those 3 games. The scary thing is that in my charting for those games, he actually could have been credited for more interceptions if the defense actually finished catches. It could have had an additional 5 interceptions, which would have been a combined 12 interceptions or fumbles, or 4 per game. With Ewers not having as much production against quality opponents and having so many turnover-worthy plays in those games, it's just hard to believe an NFL team will be willing to be a big believer in him. But again, we'll see later with his game against Michigan that we'll see at least that there is a little bit of a glimmer of a hope, as he was great that game, completing 66.7% of his passes for 246 yards, 3 touchdowns, and didn't have a single interception or fumble. So there's going to be a lot to unpack with Ewers, so let's get to it. Starting with Ewers' footwork, it's still a big work in progress that isn't where I would like to see a multi-year starter be at. He did make a bit of progress by getting less toesy and bouncy in the pocket, but other than that, oof. If you are familiar with Ewers at all or have watched him, you'll probably know about his accuracy issues. And while some of the upper body components play a role in that, a lot of it stems down to his footwork. His lower body and upper body are almost never in sync, and he even struggles to consistently get his toes pointed towards his target. His base width fluctuates all game, with it tending to be way too narrow and completely collapsing under pressure. His dropback is also very narrow and very heel clicky, and has a tendency to overstride on his deep ball, leading to further accuracy problems downfield. All those issues led to some really poor on-platform charting results, which we'll see later, and if you don't trust my results, I've been seeing a number of other people who also chart quarterbacks say his accuracy is one of the worst in the past few years that they've seen. So with his footwork still being a major liability, Ewers ended up earning just a D for his footwork for his first grade of this eval. Going to his pocket presence, this is another area that needs a lot of work, but he was more willing to take more throwaways this season, which helped reduce his sack rate a little bit. Also, when he was either making a throwaway or had pressure in his face, he showed a lot of toughness and never shied away from making a throw through a hit. But he is just way too frozen in the pocket and could have avoided a lot of the sacks had he just stepped up or made any sort of movement with his protection. When he does notice pressure, it's usually too late to avoid the sack, or he'll even just get too confident in his athletic ability and try to escape the pressure and misread the block, leading to an unnecessary sack. When he does notice the pressure, it's usually too late to avoid the sack, or he'll even get too confident in his athletic ability to try to escape the pressure and misread his block, leading to an unnecessary sack. He also can just struggle to find passing windows with a high number of deflections in the games I charted and in overall throughout the season. So with Ewers' pocket presence still also being a letdown, Ewers earned just a D for his pocket presence due to it still being well behind where it should be for a player with the amount of experience that he has. Going to his arm strength and release, I'm not sure I would consider Ewers to have elite arm strength, but for a quarterback who primarily throws with his upper body, he consistently still generates a lot of velocity and can drive the ball downfield. Also, his release is a bit funky with the 3/4 release, but he can throw the ball at almost any angle he wants. There also isn't a lot of dip to his release despite the awkward path, and it's still fast thanks to his arm strength. But the awkward 3/4 release does make it more difficult to make touch throws, and he also makes things even harder for him sometimes by relying on sidearm throws too often, which are even harder to put touch on, and also are just a lot easier for defenders to make a play on the ball. Also, when he is rushing his process, either due to getting flustered while reading the defense or from pressure, he can release the ball at the wrong release point, leading to some way off targets. So though it might be generous, I did give Ewers an A- for his arm strength, especially since most of the velocity that he puts on balls is coming primarily from his upper body. For his release, he earned a B since though it does have an awkward path and doesn't lend itself to touch, it is pretty quick, which is a big plus for him. For his playmaking, ball security, and top start potential, I don't use this argument often, but I do truly wonder if we would seriously consider Ewers as an NFL prospect if he wasn't at Texas and on the national stage so often. Despite being in a QB-friendly system that had play action on 42.1% of his pass attempts, which for context is the second highest in this class and opens things up for him way too easily, having Steve Sarkisian who runs a great offensive system and a good supporting cast around him, Ewers still had 17.5% of his pass attempts as screen passes, which is the third highest in this class, and 60% of his passes failing to go 10 yards or further from the line of scrimmage. That's just really hard to justify for a multi-year starter with the help that he has, and him limiting the offense so much was the big reason why a number of people had legitimate cases for why Arch Manning should get playing time this year. He's just so hesitant to get the ball down the field in college, and I don't see it getting any better in the NFL. Now when he did try to drive the ball down the field, Ewers had no regard for human life and would often throw hospital balls, leading to his pass catchers taking huge hits. Which really just kind of shows that he struggles to read the full field and not notice incoming defenders either about to lay a hit on his pass catchers or even about to make an interception. The biggest thing that is hard to believe is that he hasn't progressed as a processor despite the playing time. Ewers seemed to be heading in the right direction as a processor last season, and he looked more confident in the Michigan game earlier this season. However, the rest of the season he looked like a deer in the headlights and was sometimes just staring down his first reach, which led to a high number of interceptions and passes deflected at the line. Also, he just doesn't have much scramble ability, despite how he acts at times trying to outrun defenders, and is going to be limited to primarily being a pocket passer. It's just hard for me to buy him as a playmaker when he's still so limited in his accuracy, pocket presence, processing, ability to protect the ball, and pick up yards on the ground. With all those deficits, it just really feels out of reach to see him reach a top starter potential in the NFL with so many limitations and just so little progression in these areas the past few years. So with Ewers feeling like he's just a little bit too much like a product of the offense, and serious questions of if he can elevate an offense with his level of inconsistency, he ended up earning just a C- for his playmaking. With an interception or fumble on 19 of his 502 dropbacks and rushes, Ewers ended up having an interception or fumble on every 29.53 passer rush attempt, which equaled out to just a C- as well per my scale. For his top star potential, he ended up scoring, you guessed it, a C- for similar reasons as his playmaking, as he's just too wildly inconsistent. Speaking of inconsistent, as I mentioned before, his accuracy is widely considered to be very inconsistent, so let's finally see what his charting numbers look like. So if you're a visual viewer, I'm sorry for the mess of red and yellow that you're seeing right now, but for those who can't see, there is at least one red square in each distance category, with most having at least one yellow or even more red like the medium area. Sorry for the bottom, which is where Texas focused a lot of its offensive efforts with Ewers at. Ewers had a score of 86.11% in the bottom left, which is very good, but then a 75% score for the short right, which is about average compared to the drafted quarterbacks from last year, and 75% in the short middle, which is at the 30th percentile compared to last year. As I mentioned, the medium area is really rough, with none of the areas even reaching 72%. His medium left was 65%, his medium middle was 71.43%, and his medium right was 64.71%, which are all among the lower percentile. The intermediate area actually starts to look a little bit good, with a 58.33% intermediate left, which is good for right-handed quarterback, 8% in the middle, which is very good, but then things go really off the rail in the right at just 27.78%, which is just dreadful. His deep area doesn't look too bad at 66.67% in the deep right, which is very good, 50% in the deep left, which is about average, but then 0% in the deep middle. So this is a really rough passing chart for a quarterback with limited mobility, and this really makes it questionable of how this will pass NFL team standards. The thing that makes this even worse is the high number of interceptions and the number of way off targets he had. In just these 4 games, he had a total score of 19 throws that were way off target, with a single value equaling either a throw that was vertically or horizontally off target and not even remotely close to his target. So that means he had a minimum of 9 throws that went remotely close to his target, which is really bad and shows just how much his poor footwork impacts his accuracy. Now the good thing is that Ewers is actually a lot better on the move, and if you're just looking at his off-platform passing chart here in a vacuum, you'd probably think we were looking at one of the top quarterbacks of this class. Ewers scored in the 70th percentile in nearly every area target, which is incredibly impressive and honestly really surprising based on that last chart we just saw. Starting at the bottom, he had a score of 87.5% in the short left and middle, which are both at least in the 70th percentile. The short right area is the only bad area, which has significant volume at 66.67%, but nearly the rest look really pretty, with 75% in the medium left, 83.33% in the medium right, and 100% in the intermediate right and deep right. He did only get scores of 50% in the medium and intermediate middle, but both had very few pass attempts, so it's a pretty small sample size. If there is any scout or anyone in general that really wants to defend Ewers and be his biggest fan, this is going to be their number one argument, and they do have a very fair case and clear evidence here. This is also why I think he is better when he's rolling out or throwing on the move, since he can get cleaner runways to his target, and in a way with his footwork being so bad that he never even has a stable base when he's in the pocket, he's already used to making throws off platform. I think it will be limiting for an NFL offense to use him primarily in rollouts early in his career, but he's just way too limited in the pocket, as we saw above, and the offensive coordinators will have to get creative until he hopefully further develops. And there's also a fair point that I made with Drake May last year, where if a quarterback is doing all the difficult things like the off-platform throws and doing those accurately, there is a reason to have optimism they can do more of the on-platform throws more accurately as well in the future. But in eval with a lot of highlights of Ewers' lows, this being as good as it is shouldn't be overlooked. So as I mentioned before, I wanted to highlight his game against Michigan since it was the best game of his season this year. You likely wouldn't expect that from just his on-platform chart here, but it does get better, I swear. But starting with his on-platform passing, they kept things really simple for Ewers by focusing most of their attention past the line of scrimmage and on one side of the field, which admittedly isn't possible to get away with in the NFL since teams would punish offenses for running such a simple game plan, but Texas could get away with that in college. But even with the team keeping things simple to one side of the field to help minimize how much Ewers had to read the field, it is very alarming how mixed the results were. He was running the short left at 85.71% and the medium right at a perfect 100%, but he was just okay with a 50% score in the deep right, but he was pretty poor in all other areas that he targeted, at 0% in the intermediate right and deep middle, 50% in the short middle, and 62.5% in the short right, which were all in the lower percentile. So just another really disappointing game from an on-platform standpoint, and there's another sign that despite how simple they make things for Ewers in the pocket, he just isn't there from an accuracy standpoint. So in the pocket, Ewers was bad, but on the move, he was amazing again. Ewers' entire off-platform passing chart is nearly all green other than the short left, which was at just 50%. But the rest, 75% in the short right, intermediate, middle, and right, and even 100% in the short middle, medium left, and middle. So again, putting Ewers in the pocket to beat a defense didn't work in college and won't in the NFL. But if you get him moving, you have a chance, and with his diverse arm angles, we'll get more options to get the ball into awkward windows. Now, defense could adjust and just try to keep him in the pocket, which definitely could shut him down, but this at least gives a bit of a framework for an NFL coaching staff to work with and finding a way to help him if he is thrust into action early on in his career. So getting to Ewers' supplemental data from his charting, his left side of the field carried his accuracy at 72.92%, which is very good, but his 68.97% in the middle and 66.44% in the right were both very poor. His final total accuracy actually looks pretty solid, but it's important to note that this also includes his off-platform totals in that total accuracy. I considered having it separate to make it clear for different areas of the field and if it was on-platform or off-platform, but with this section already being pretty cluttered, I decided to just put them together since it's just for reference anyways. But regardless, if we filter out the off-platform throws, that keeps his left side of the field accuracy at nearly the same rate at 72.98%, but drops his middle accuracy slightly to 68.18%, and really drops his right side of the field accuracy to 63.64%. That all drops his total accuracy then to 67.54%, which would be below the 50th percentile. Which is really weird since you would normally expect the removal of off-platform throws to help a quarterback's accuracy, but Ewers is just a weird quarterback prospect. As I mentioned before, Ewers had a very high number of way off throws with, surprise surprise, the majority coming on platform or in the pocket. Ewers had a lot of sacks in the sample games with 16 total, or 4 per game, and had 3 of his 7 fumbles throughout the season in these games. He also had a high number of deflected balls with 9 in just the 4 games. Also for reference, his throws off target kind of helped him since he got a good number of pass interference calls on some of his underthrown balls and got 6 total calls in those games. While he's still taking sacks, seeing him take 12 throwaways in those games is trending in the right direction of better pocket discipline. What's not trending in the right direction is the interceptions and dropped interceptions. Ewers had 4 interceptions in the game sampled, which isn't that bad, but the 6 dropped interceptions make that a whole lot worse. So if the defense actually converted those interceptions, he would have had 10 interceptions or 2.5 interceptions per game, and then added nearly a fumble a game, and we're essentially talking about 3 turnovers per game, which is pretty inexcusable with how little he would push the ball downfield at times. Now you can use the excuse that the majority of those dropped interceptions came in his first matchup against Georgia, but I'm not exactly sure how much of a good picture that paints for him, that he could have thrown 5 interceptions and had 2 fumbles in a single game that he didn't even play every snap of. Continuing to drops by his pass catchers is about middle of the pack at 9. As I mentioned, he isn't much of a rusher with no design quarterback runs and just one scramble that went for a positive gain. Finally, his success against beating blitzes and pressures is just as poor as you might expect. His success against blitz is actually the best of the two at 55.36%, but is still below the 50th percentile. That isn't ideal, and it is really alarming when we consider that he has the benefit of a passing game with a lot of quick passes that punishes blitzes and should help boost that grade. His pressure grade is also one of the worst I've graded, and of the quarterbacks from last year, only Spencer Rattler and Devin Leary had a lower success against pressure, which is really bad company for this category. So again, just another limiting factor with his lack of ability to beat pressure. So all that data led to Ewers getting a B+ in short throw accuracy, B for medium throw accuracy, just a C+ for intermediate throw accuracy, just a C for his deep throw accuracy, not surprisingly an A for his throw on the run ability, and a B- for his success against blitz and pressure, which admittedly was carried by the offense's ability to help raise his success against blitz with the quick passing. For a summary of Ewers' strengths, he is capable of throwing the ball at any angle he wants, and that ability to have such diverse arm angles in his throws is an asset that not many quarterbacks have. Also, while he doesn't have a cannon of an arm, he does have a lot of arm talent and has the physical capability of making nearly any throw. He also has a quick release that lets him be more active in the short throw passing schemes, and gives him a chance to get the ball in the tight windows when you combine that with his arm strength and the arm angles he can throw at. Also, it was really encouraging to see him more willing to take throwaways this season, and hopefully he continues to build off this to continue to improve his pocket management skills. Finally, his accuracy on the move or off platform is legit, and is one of, if not the best in the class. While he has undeniable deficits, this is a clear strength of his over a lot of the other quarterbacks in this class. As I mentioned though, Ewers still has a lot of deficiencies despite his experience. He's behind as a processor and still locks onto his first read way too often. He also lacks a good feel in the pocket, being too stiff and slow to react to pressure. He also just in general really lacks consistency. There are times when he can make some truly incredible throws that look like something only a top quarterback can make. And then other times he's just completely underthrowing his target or airmailing a wide open player. A lot of those issues have to do with his footwork, which unfortunately hasn't gotten much better in the past few years, and it feels like a fleeting hope that it'll suddenly get better in the NFL. Finally, his accuracy and ball placement from the pocket is just so far below average that he's just a complete liability in the pocket right now. So by taking the average of all Ewers grades, he ended up with just a 2.39 out of 4, which equals out to needing improvements to contribute with my scale. I expected to be low on Ewers, but this is admittedly lower than I expected it would turn out. But if we are being honest, it's just hard to see a quarterback who has poor footwork, poor pocket management skills, poor accuracy, poor success against pressure, and poor ability to protect the ball turn into a meaningful star in the NFL. There's just not a lot of great history to back that sort of case happening, so it just makes me really worried about Ewers. Ewers will have to be a project in the NFL and will need to be on a Jordan Love-like development plan, but there are so many deficiencies that it's hard to know where to start, and if a staff will be able to see the end product with how fast some coaching staffs can change. So while others may be higher on Ewers, I prefer the other quarterbacks in the class that are either further along in their development or have more special traits. As for a comp, I have Deshaun Kaiser at Quinn Ewers comp. Like Ewers, Kaiser had a strong arm but a really wonky release that affected his touch. However, both could drive the ball downfield and weren't afraid to absorb a hit to make a throw. Both also weren't great athletes, but weren't afraid to scramble and could pick up some yards if given a chance. Unfortunately, both were wildly inconsistent in both their footwork and accuracy. Both were also poor decision makers who were too reliant on their first reach, which led to too many turnovers. Both also had poor pocket presence and would take more sacks than was necessary. Like Kaiser, Ewers could be targeted early due to his perceived potential and the pedigree of his program, but will need to go to a patient coaching staff that will let him sit for a few years. Kaiser unfortunately was thrown into the fire in his rookie season and never went to a stable or patient enough team to be able to let him develop, which led to him being out of the league very quickly. I have concerns the same could happen to Ewers if a boneheaded team decides they want to take him early because they want a quote-unquote winning quarterback or a quote-unquote experienced quarterback and don't have a real plan to develop him. And that's all for Quinn Ewers. Let me know what your thoughts are on the eval and on Ewers, since I think he is a quarterback who will generate a lot of different opinions this draft cycle. I'm planning to actually have my Jalen Milroe video out next week. I'll be working to have a quarterback eval most of the weeks leading up to the draft, so to be sure you don't miss any of them, be sure to subscribe. While you're at it, like the video as it would help the channel and the series grow thanks to you. And if you want just a written form of the eval, you can subscribe to my Substack. It'll have the full written eval for each player out at the same time as the video. But thank you all and see you all next time.